Dr. Kethavar had spent 300 years digging through old records. His 6 arms moved quickly as he sorted through the ancient files in the great library of Zentari Prime. Most scholars called him crazy for wasting his time with dead languages and forgotten worlds. They said he should focus on modern science instead of old stories. But Kethavar knew something they did not. Hidden in the oldest records were warnings that made his blood run cold. The first tablet he found was made of black stone. It came from the Velkari people who died out 2,000 years ago. The writing was hard to read, but he managed to translate most of it. It spoke of creatures from a blue world in the outer edges of the galaxy. The Velkari called them the ones who never stop fighting. At first, Kethavar thought it was just another war story. Every dead race had stories about their enemies. But then he found a second tablet from the Mordan civilization. They lived on the other side of the galaxy from the Velkari. They could never have met each other, yet their tablet told the same story about the same blue world. The Mordan writing was different, but the message was clear. They wrote about bipedal creatures who fought not just to win battles, but to survive at any cost. These creatures would rather die than give up. They turned everything around them into weapons. They never stopped adapting to new threats. Kethavar found more tablets over the next 50 years. 12 different races, all extinct, all with the same warning. The Zephani called them the Endless Warriors. The Torvak named them Death That Walks on 2 Legs. The ancient Kriltar wrote simply, "They will consume everything." Each tablet described the same location in space. A small yellow star with 9 planets. The third planet was blue and green, covered mostly in water. The warnings all said the same thing. Never go to that world. Never wake the creatures that live there. They are too dangerous to exist alongside other life. The tablets were old. Some were 10,000 years old. Others were even older. But they all agreed on one thing. The creatures from the blue world were the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. Kethavar brought his findings to the Galactic Council. He stood before the great assembly hall where representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered to make decisions. The hall was huge, with seats rising up in circles around the speaking floor. Thousands of different alien species looked down at him with curiosity and doubt. "Honored council members," Kethavar began, his voice shaking with excitement. "I have discovered something that could change everything we know about our galaxy." Council leader Zareth, a tall blue creature with 4 eyes, looked bored. "Dr. Kethavar, we have heard about your obsession with old stories. Please make this quick." Kethavar activated the holographic display. Images of the ancient tablets appeared in the air above him. These tablets come from 12 different civilizations. They lived in different parts of the galaxy at different times. None of them ever met each other. Yet they all warn about the same thing. The council members leaned forward slightly. A few seemed interested now. They warn about a species from a blue world in the outer rim, a species that fights differently than any other life form. They do not fight for territory or resources. They fight to survive, and they never ever stop fighting. Council member Veltara from the Trade Worlds laughed. "Dr. Kethavar, we have surveyed that sector many times. There are only primitive worlds there. No advanced civilizations at all. But that is exactly what makes this so important," Kethavar said, his voice getting louder. "What if they are not advanced yet? What if they are still developing? The tablets say these creatures adapt quickly. What happens when they finally reach the stars?" The council chamber filled with the sound of alien laughter. Species from across the galaxy found the idea amusing. The great Zentari Empire had ruled for 5,000 years. They had defeated every enemy they ever faced. The idea that some primitive creatures could be a threat was ridiculous. "Dr. Kethavar," said Council Leader Zareth, "you're asking us to fear creatures that do not even have spaceflight. Our scouts report that the third planet in that system has millions of small tribes fighting each other with crude weapons. They cannot even unite their own world. How could they possibly threaten the galaxy?" Kethavar felt his heart sinking. They were not listening. They could not see what he saw in the ancient warnings. But the tablets clearly state, "The tablets," interrupted Council Member Yexani from the Warrior Caste, "were written by dead civilizations. Dead civilizations that were clearly too weak to survive. Perhaps they were simply afraid of everything, more. Laughter filled the chamber. Kethvar tried to speak again, but Council Leader Zareth raised his hand for silence. Dr. Kethvar, we appreciate your research, but the Council has more important matters to discuss. We suggest you focus your studies on something more useful to the present day. The session ended. Kethvar stood alone on the speaking floor as thousands of alien representatives filed out of the chamber. None of them seemed worried. None of them understood what the ancient warnings really meant. That same day, far across the galaxy, Captain Jake Morrison was preparing for humanity's first journey to another star. He stood on the bridge of the UES horizon, looking out at the stars through the main view screen. His crew was small but skilled. Engineer Lisa Brooks was checking the new faster-than-light drive for the 100th time. Dr. Alex Turner was reviewing their scientific mission goals. Communications Officer Ben Clark was testing their long-range communication systems. All systems ready, Captain, Lisa reported from her station. The drive is working perfectly. Jake nodded. Ben, any word from Earth Command? Just the standard. Good luck message, sir, Ben replied. We are cleared for departure. Jake looked around at his crew. They were about to make history. Humanity was finally going to the stars. After centuries of looking up at the night sky and wondering what was out there, they were about to find out. Take us out, Lisa, Jake ordered. The horizon jumped to faster-than-light speed. Behind them, Earth grew smaller until it was just another point of light. Ahead of them waited the unknown. None of them knew that ancient warnings had been written about their species. None of them knew that 12 civilizations had tried to warn the galaxy about humanity, and none of them knew that very soon, the galaxy would remember why those warnings existed. The UES horizon dropped out of faster-than-light speed near a bright yellow star. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the star grow larger on the main screen. This was the first time humans had ever traveled this far from Earth. The excitement on the bridge was easy to feel. Scan complete, Captain, Dr. Alex Turner reported from his science station. 3 planets in this system. The second one looks like it might have had water once. Any signs of life? Jake asked. Nothing on the planets, but... Alex paused and looked at his readings again. Captain, I'm picking up something else. Large, metallic objects heading our way. Jake felt his stomach tighten. How large? Much larger than us, sir. 5 ships, each about 3 times the size of the horizon. Before Jake could respond, the communication system started beeping. Ben Clark quickly worked at his station. Captain, we're receiving a transmission. It's not in any Earth language, but the computer is trying to translate. Put it through, Jake ordered. A voice filled the bridge. The translation was rough, but the meaning was clear. Unknown vessel, you have entered Zentari space without permission. Identify yourself immediately or be destroyed. Jake looked at his crew. They were all staring at him, waiting for his decision. This was first contact with an alien species. Everything they said now would be remembered in history books. Ben, open a channel, Jake said. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel Horizon. We come in peace. We did not know this was your space. We are explorers from the planet Earth. There was a long pause. Then the alien voice came back, but this time it sounded different, more suspicious. Earth? We have no record of this world. You will surrender your vessel for inspection. Any resistance will result in your destruction. Jake felt his crew looking at him again. Lisa Brooks spoke up from her engineering station. Captain, their ships are much more advanced than ours. If they want to fight, we don't stand a chance. No, Jake replied quietly. Then he spoke into the communicator again. We understand. We will cooperate with your inspection. The alien ships moved closer. Jake could see them clearly now on the main screen. They were sleek and powerful, with weapons that looked like they could destroy the horizon with a single shot. One of the ships was much larger than the others, clearly the command vessel. On board the Zentari command ship, Commander Velthar studied the human vessel on his screen. He had been patrolling this sector for 50 years and had never seen anything like it. The ship was crude compared to Zentari technology, but it was clearly capable of faster-than-light travel. That meant the species that built it was more advanced than his initial scans suggested. "Analysis complete, Commander," his science officer reported. "The vessel appears to be from a species we have never encountered. Their technology is primitive, but functional. The ship carries only 4 life forms." Velthar nodded. "Prepare a boarding party. We will examine their vessel and determine if they pose a threat to the Empire." "Sir," his communications officer said, "they claim to be peaceful explorers." "That is what they all say," Velthar replied. "But a species that can build faster-than-light ships without our knowledge is a species that could be dangerous. We will take no chances." The boarding party prepared to transfer to the human ship. Velthar decided to lead it himself. He wanted to see these humans with his own eyes. On the horizon, Jake watched the alien boarding craft approach. "Remember," he told his crew, "we are representing all of humanity right now. Stay calm and answer their questions honestly." The boarding craft attached to the horizon's hull. Jake and his crew waited in the main corridor as the aliens cut through their airlock. The first thing that struck Jake was how tall the aliens were. They stood nearly 8 feet high, with blue skin and 4 arms. Their leader stepped forward. I am Commander Velthar of the Zentari Navy," the alien said through a translation device. "You will answer my questions truthfully." "Of course," Jake replied. "I am Captain Jake Morrison. These are my officers." Velthar studied the humans carefully. They were smaller than he expected, but something about them made him uneasy. They stood straight and looked directly at him, showing no fear. Most primitive species cowered when they first met the Zentari. "Where is your homeworld?" Velthar asked. "Earth," Jake answered. "It's about 15 light-years from here." "How many ships does your species have?" Jake hesitated. The truth was that the Horizon was humanity's only faster-than-light ship, but something told him that admitting this might not be wise. "We have others," he said carefully. Velthar's eyes narrowed. The human was being evasive. "How many others?" "Several," Jake replied, trying to sound confident. This was a lie, and Velthar could sense it. He had dealt with many species over the years, and he could usually tell when someone was not telling the truth. But something about these humans bothered him. They were too calm for a species that had just met a superior alien force. "Commander," one of his officers said quietly, "our scans show that their ship is alone. There are no other vessels in this system." Velthar processed this information. The humans were lying about their numbers. This could mean several things. Either they were scouts for a larger force, or they were trying to hide their weakness. Either possibility made them dangerous. "You are scouts," he said to Jake. "You are here to gather information about our space for an invasion." Jake's eyes widened. "No, that's not true. We're explorers. We're just trying to learn about the galaxy." "All species say that," Velthar replied coldly. "Then they return with warships." The situation was getting worse by the minute. Jake could see the suspicion in the alien commander's eyes. Every word he spoke seemed to make things worse. "Please," Jake said. "We mean no harm. We didn't even know you existed until today." Velthar made his decision. These humans were clearly scouts for a larger force. The fact that they had developed faster-than-light travel without the Zentari knowing about it proved they were dangerous. He could not allow them to return to their homeworld with information about Zentari space. "You will be taken to Zentari Prime for questioning," he announced. "Your ship will be impounded." "That's not necessary," Jake protested. "We'll leave your space immediately and never return." "It is too late for that," Velthar said. He turned to his officers. "Prepare to tow their vessel." Jake felt panic rising in his chest. If they were taken prisoner, Earth would never know what happened to them. Worse, Earth would never know that hostile aliens existed so close to home. "Wait," he said desperately. "Let me contact my homeworld. I can prove we're peaceful." Velthar was done talking. He signaled to his officers to begin the towing operation. But as they moved to carry out his orders, something went wrong. The human ship's engines suddenly came to life at full power in the Horizon's engine room. Lisa Brooks had been listening to the conversation through the ship's internal communication system. When she heard that they were going to be taken prisoner, she made a decision that would change everything. She overrode the safety protocols and pushed the engines to maximum power. The Horizon broke free from the boarding craft and accelerated, rapidly. On the bridge, Jake realized what Lisa had done. "Lisa, what are you doing?" "Getting us out of here, Captain," she replied over the intercom. "They're not going to let us go." But the Centauri ships were faster. They quickly surrounded the Horizon and opened fire. The first energy blast hit the hull and sent the ship spinning. Alarms sounded throughout the vessel. "Hull breach in Section 3, Ben reported. "We're losing atmosphere." Jake knew they couldn't outrun the alien ships. They were outgunned and outnumbered. In a few minutes, the Horizon would be destroyed, and humanity's first contact with aliens would end in disaster. Then he remembered something from his military training. Sometimes the only way to win was to make the enemy pay such a high price for victory that they would think twice about fighting you again. "Lisa," he said into the intercom, "prepare to ram the lead ship." "Captain?" Lisa's voice was uncertain. "You heard me. Get everyone to the escape pods. I'm staying behind to make sure we hit them hard." His crew looked at him in shock. "Jake, you can't," Alex said. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," Jake replied. "But maybe if we hurt them enough, they'll think twice before attacking the next human ship they meet." As his crew reluctantly headed for the escape pods, Jake turned the Horizon toward the largest Centauri ship. Commander Velthar watched in disbelief as the primitive human vessel accelerated directly at his command ship. "What are they doing?" his weapons officer asked. Velthar realized the truth just before impact. "They're sacrificing themselves to save their crew." The Horizon smashed into the Centauri command ship at full speed. The explosion lit up space like a new star. When the light faded, both ships were gone. Lisa Brooks floated in her escape pod for 6 days before a human rescue ship found her. She was the only survivor from the Horizon's crew. When the rescue team brought her aboard, she was barely alive. But she had something more valuable than her life. She had the complete sensor data from their encounter with the Centauri. 3 weeks later, Lisa sat in a hospital bed on Earth, telling her story to Admiral Kate Sullivan. The Admiral listened carefully as Lisa described the alien ships, their weapons, and how they had attacked without warning. "They were going to take us prisoner," Lisa said, her voice still weak from her ordeal. "Captain Morrison knew they would never let us go home. He gave his life so Earth would know what's out there." Admiral Sullivan studied the sensor data on her tablet. The alien ships were more advanced than anything Earth had ever built. Their weapons could destroy human vessels with ease. Their technology was centuries ahead of humanity's best efforts. "How many ships did they have?" the Admiral asked. 5 in that patrol group," Lisa replied. "But their commander talked like there were many more. He called it the Centauri Empire." Admiral Sullivan felt a cold fear settle in her stomach. An empire meant thousands of ships, maybe millions. And they were only 15 light years from Earth. The next day, Admiral Sullivan stood before the Earth Defense Council. Representatives from every nation sat around the large table, their faces grim as they listened to her report. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we are no longer alone in the universe, and we are not safe." She activated the holographic display, showing them the data from the Horizon's encounter. The alien ships appeared in the air above the table, their sleek forms and massive weapons clear for all to see. "The Centauri attacked our ship without warning," she continued. "They intended to take our people prisoner. When Captain Morrison tried to escape, they opened fire with intent to destroy." President Helen Carter leaned forward. "What are you recommending, Admiral?" Admiral Sullivan took a deep breath. "We prepare for war." The room erupted in worried voices. Representatives argued with each other in a dozen different languages. Finally, President Carter called for quiet. "Admiral, surely we can negotiate with them," said Ambassador John Lee from the Diplomatic Corps. "There must be some way to make peace." They fired first, Admiral Sullivan replied firmly. They showed no interest in talking. They saw us as a threat to be eliminated. Dr. Sam Hayes, Earth's top scientist, spoke up from his seat. Admiral, you're talking about fighting an empire that has technology centuries ahead of ours. How do we fight ships that can destroy us with one shot? Admiral Sullivan smiled grimly. The same way our ancestors fought when they were outgunned. We don't fight fair. Over the next month, Earth transformed. Every military base became a production center. Every scientist worked on new weapons. Every engineer designed new ships. The planet had not seen such unity since the great wars of the previous century. Colonel Mike Davis led the effort to design new fighting ships. He studied the sensor, data from the horizon, and made a shocking decision. Instead of trying to match Centauri technology, he would ignore it completely. We can't build ships as good as theirs, he told his team, so we won't try. We'll build ships designed to do one thing: ram their vessels and explode. The new ships were called rams. They were small, fast, and packed with nuclear weapons. Each one carried enough explosive power to destroy a city. More importantly, they needed no crew. They were completely automated, guided by artificial intelligence programmed with one simple order: find the enemy and crash into them. Dr. Amy Collins worked on a different kind of weapon. She studied the biological data that Dr. Alex Turner had gathered before his death. The Centauri were similar enough to Earth life that certain Earth diseases might affect them. We can't kill them with our weapons, she told her research team, but maybe we can kill them with our germs. Working around the clock, Dr. Collins developed viruses designed specifically to attack Centauri biology. The viruses would be loaded into special warheads that would spread the disease through enemy ships' air systems. Engineer Tony Martinez focused on a third approach. He designed ships that looked like ordinary cargo vessels, but were actually mobile weapons platforms. They would get close to enemy ships by pretending to surrender, then attack at close range. If they want to board our ships, he said, we'll let them. Then we'll blow up both ships. Admiral Sullivan coordinated all these efforts from her command center beneath the Rocky Mountains. She had learned something important from studying Earth's military history. When facing a superior enemy, the key was not to fight the way they expected. The Centauri are used to civilized warfare, she told her staff. They follow rules. They try to minimize casualties. They fight with honor. She paused and looked around the room. We're going to fight to survive. The first human counterattack came 6 months after the Horizon incident. A Centauri patrol found what looked like a disabled human cargo ship drifting in space. Commander Yelnash decided to board it and capture any survivors for questioning. The moment his boarding party entered the human ship, it exploded. The blast was so powerful it destroyed both vessels completely. Commander Yelnash and his entire crew died instantly. Similar attacks began happening throughout Centauri space. Human ships would appear, seemingly helpless, and when Centauri forces moved to capture them, they would explode. The explosions were always massive, designed to take out as many enemy ships as possible. Captain Nick Thompson led the first human boarding action 3 months later. His ship, disguised as a damaged freighter, was captured by a Centauri cruiser. When the aliens brought it into their cargo bay, Thompson and his Marines emerged from hidden compartments. The Centauri were not prepared for close combat inside their own ship. Human soldiers were smaller and faster in the narrow corridors. They wore armor that could stop Centauri energy weapons, and they carried weapons designed for ship-to-ship fighting. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, Thompson's team had captured the entire Centauri cruiser. More importantly, they had captured its crew alive. Dr. Collins's biological weapons were tested on the prisoners. The results exceeded her expectations. The Centauri had no immunity to Earth diseases. A single virus could kill an entire ship's crew within days. Word of these new human tactics spread quickly through the Centauri Empire. Ship commanders who had once been eager to engage unknown vessels now approached them with extreme caution. The humans were not fighting like any enemy they had ever faced. Commander Velthar, who had survived the destruction of his ship during the Horizon incident, tried to warn his superiors about what they were facing. These humans do not fight like a civilized species, he reported to the Zentari High Command. They use every dirty trick imaginable. They sacrifice their own lives just to kill a few of our people. They turn everything into a weapon. But the Zentari High Command did not listen. They were confident that their superior technology would eventually win the war. They ordered more ships to human space, expecting to crush the primitive enemy through overwhelming force. They had no idea that humanity was just getting started. Admiral Sullivan received reports of every human victory, no matter how small. Each success proved that her strategy was working. The Zentari might have better technology, but humans had something the aliens could not understand: the willingness to do whatever it took to survive. They expected us to fight like civilized beings, she told President Carter during one of their daily briefings. They expected us to surrender when we were outgunned. They expected us to follow their rules. She looked at the star map on her wall, showing the locations of recent battles. Red dots marked human victories. There were more red dots every day. But we're not civilized when our survival is at stake, she continued. We're the species that survived ice ages, plagues, and world wars. We're the species that turned warfare into a science long before we reached the stars. President Carter nodded grimly. How long before they realize what they're really fighting? Admiral Sullivan smiled coldly. They're starting to figure it out, but by then, it will be too late. Far across the galaxy, Dr. Kethvar sat in his study, reading the latest reports from the war zone. The ancient tablets lay open on his desk, their warnings clear in the dim light. The humans were doing exactly what the tablet said they would do. They were consuming the war, adapting to it, and emerging stronger from every battle. The Zentari Empire was learning what 12 extinct civilizations had tried to warn them about. Some species were too dangerous to fight, and humanity was one of them. The war had been going on for 2 years when the first rebellion started. The Kethani people lived on a mining world at the edge of Zentari space. They had served the Empire for over 300 years, digging precious metals from their planet's core. They had never caused trouble before, but the Kethani had been listening to human radio broadcasts. The humans transmitted messages across the galaxy in dozens of languages, telling other species about the war. The messages were simple. The Zentari are not invincible. We are proving it every day. Join us and be free. Elder Vectar called a secret meeting of the Kethani Council. The old mining leader had watched his people suffer under Zentari rule for his entire life. Now, for the first time, he saw hope. The humans are winning battles, he told the council. They destroyed 3 Zentari battle groups last month. If they can fight the Empire, so can we. The rebellion started small. Mining equipment broke down more often. Shipments of metals arrived late. Guards found themselves locked in storage rooms. Within weeks, the Kethani had stopped all metal production. The Zentari response was swift and brutal. Commander Zextal arrived with 2 battle cruisers and a battalion of troops. He expected to crush the rebellion in a few days. Instead, he found that the Kethani had learned from human tactics. They had turned their mining tunnels into death traps. They used mining explosives to collapse tunnels on Zentari troops. They poisoned the air in the mines with gases from their industrial equipment. The Zentari had trained to fight in space. They were not prepared for underground warfare against an enemy that knew every tunnel and cave on the planet. Commander Zextal sent desperate messages back to Zentari Prime. The rebels are using human tactics. They fight like animals. They show no mercy to prisoners. I need more troops. But the Empire had no more troops to send. Every available ship was fighting the humans. Captain Rachel Stone led the human assault on the fortress world of Nexvar. The planet was supposed to be impossible to attack. It had orbital defense platforms that could destroy entire fleets. It had underground bunkers that could survive nuclear attacks. It had enough supplies to withstand a siege for decades. Rachel studied the planet's defenses for months before making her attack plan. She realized that the Zentari had built their fortress to defend against normal attacks. They had not prepared for human-style warfare. We're not going to attack their defenses, she told her team. We're going to make their defenses attack themselves. Rachel's plan was simple and terrible. Human ships would approach the planet carrying what looked like refugees. The ships would broadcast distress signals, claiming to be civilian vessels fleeing from human space. When the Zentari allowed them to approach, the ships would crash into the planet's main power stations. The plan worked perfectly. The fortress world's defenses went dark. Emergency power kept some systems running, but not enough to stop what came next. Maria Gonzalez led a team of human snipers who had been hidden in the refugee ships. While the Zentari tried to restore power, Maria's team eliminated key personnel from long range. Carl Johnson led the demolition experts who destroyed the planet's communication systems. Within 6 hours, the fortress world was cut off from the Empire and defenseless. The human fleet moved in and demanded surrender. Commander Heltrack, Lamau, fortress commander, had never surrendered in 40 years of military service. But he was facing an enemy unlike any he had ever fought. The humans had turned his own defenses against him. They had used his mercy against refugees as a weapon. "What kind of species uses civilians as weapons?" he asked his second-in-command. "The kind that wins wars," came the reply. The surrender of Nexvar sent shockwaves through the Zentari Empire. If the fortress worlds could fall to human tactics, nowhere was safe. Admiral Peter Kim commanded the human fleet as it pushed deeper into Zentari space. He had learned much from studying captured Zentari ships. The aliens were excellent engineers and skilled warriors, but they followed predictable patterns. "They fight the way they think civilized beings should fight," he explained to his captains during a strategy meeting. "They give warnings before attacking. They try to minimize civilian casualties. They follow ancient codes of military honor." Pointed to the star map showing their recent victories. "We fight to win. We use whatever works. We adapt to every situation. That's why we're winning." The breaking point came when humans captured a major Zentari communication hub. Dr. Kevin White had spent months learning how to operate captured Zentari technology. Now he used that knowledge to broadcast a message to every world in the galaxy. The message was transmitted in over 200 alien languages. It was simple and direct. "This is humanity. We did not start this war, but we will finish it. Any species that helps the Zentari will be treated as our enemy. Any species that helps us will have our protection. The Zentari Empire is falling. Choose your side wisely." The message was heard on thousands of worlds. Species that had never heard of humans suddenly learned that a new power was rising in the galaxy, a power that had brought the mighty Zentari Empire to its knees. The effect was immediate. Rebellion started on dozens of worlds. Species that had served the Empire for centuries suddenly remembered what freedom felt like. The Zentari found themselves fighting wars on 100 different fronts. Commander Veltar, now missing his left arm from a human boarding action, stood in the ruins of what had once been Zentari Naval Command. Human cyber attacks had destroyed most of their computer systems. Human saboteurs had blown up their main shipyards. Human biological weapons had killed thousands of their best officers. He thought about the first human ship he had encountered 2 years ago, the primitive vessel with its crude technology and small crew. He had thought it was no threat to the Empire. Now he understood what Dr. Kethver had been trying to tell them. The ancient warnings had been real. Humanity was exactly what their ancestors had feared. A junior officer approached him with the latest casualty reports. "Sir, we've lost another 12 ships in the Outer Rim. The humans are using a new tactic. They're attaching explosives to asteroids and launching them at our vessels." Velthar was not surprised. Every week, the humans developed new ways to kill Zentari forces. They were the most adaptable enemy he had ever faced. "Sir," the officer continued, "High Command is asking for your recommendations." Velthar looked at the young officer. The recruit was barely old enough to serve, rushed into the military because so many experienced soldiers were dead. "My recommendation?" Velthar said quietly. "End this war before it ends us." The officer looked shocked. "Sir, we can't surrender to a primitive species." "They are not primitive," Velthar replied. "They are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and we woke them up. On Earth, Admiral Sullivan received reports of victories from across the galaxy. Human forces were winning battles that should have been impossible. Species throughout the Empire were joining the rebellion. The Zentari military was collapsing under pressure from 100 different directions. But Sullivan knew the war was not over yet. The Zentari still had their home fleet, they still controlled their core worlds, and desperate enemies could do dangerous things. They're going to try something big, she told her staff during their daily briefing. They can't win the war anymore, but they might try to destroy Earth out of spite. General Linda Foster, commander of Earth's Home Defense Forces, nodded grimly. Our long-range sensors show massive ship movements in Zentari space. They're gathering everything they have left. Admiral Sullivan studied the intelligence reports. The Zentari were preparing for one final battle. They would throw everything they had at Earth, hoping to destroy humanity's homeworld even if it cost them their entire remaining fleet. Let them come, Sullivan said finally. We'll be ready. She looked around the room at her officers. These people had led humanity through the greatest war in its history. They had taken a species that barely knew how to travel between stars and turned it into a galactic power. The ancient warnings spoke of humans, she said. They said we were too dangerous to exist alongside other life. The Zentari are about to learn that those warnings were not a threat. They were a promise. The final battle was coming, and humanity would be ready for it. The Zentari fleet arrived at Earth with over 300 ships. It was the largest military force the Empire had ever assembled. Supreme Commander Naltesh stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the blue planet that had caused so much trouble. This is where it all began, he said to his officers. This is where we end it. The plan was simple. The Zentari would destroy Earth and every human in the solar system. Even if it cost them their entire fleet, the galaxy would be safe from the human threat. But as the Zentari ships moved closer to Earth, they found something unexpected. The solar system was empty. No human ships were visible. No defense platforms protected the planet. Earth seemed completely defenseless. This has to be a trap, warned Commander Velthar, who had been assigned to the flagship for this final battle. The humans would never leave their home world unprotected. Supreme Commander Naltesh disagreed. They are spread too thin fighting across the galaxy. They cannot defend everywhere at once. He was wrong. The attack began when the Zentari fleet was halfway to Earth. Human ships appeared from behind asteroids and moons where they had been hiding. But these were not ordinary ships. They were completely new designs that no Zentari had ever seen before. Admiral Lisa Brooks, now commanding the human home fleet, smiled grimly as her ships opened fire. She had survived the destruction of the horizon 3 years ago. Now she would make the Zentari pay for every human life they had taken. All ships execute Battle Plan Omega, she ordered. The human ships moved like nothing the Zentari had ever faced. They were faster, more maneuverable, and carried weapons that seemed impossible. The humans had spent 3 years studying captured Zentari technology. Now they had built ships that were better than anything the Empire possessed. But the real surprise was not the human ships. It was their allies. Ships from dozens of rebel species emerged from hiding throughout the solar system. The Cathani had brought their mining vessels, converted into mobile weapons platforms. The Velkari had sent their fastest scouts, now loaded with human-designed missiles. Even the peaceful Mordan had joined the fight, their cargo ships carrying devastating new weapons. Supreme Commander Naltesh watched in horror as his massive fleet was surrounded. How many species are fighting with them? All of them, sir, his sensor officer replied. Every major rebellion has sent ships to defend Earth. The battle lasted 18 hours. The Zentari fought with desperate courage, knowing this was their last chance to win the war. But they were facing an enemy that had learned from every previous battle. Human ships worked in perfect coordination with their alien allies. They used tactics that no military academy had ever taught. They adapted to every Zentari strategy within minutes of encountering it. Captain Nick Thompson led a boarding action against the Zentari flagship. His mixed team of humans and aliens fought their way through the massive ship's corridors. When They reached the bridge. Supreme Commander Naltesh was waiting for them with his personal guard. "You cannot win," Naltesh said, raising his weapon. "Even if you defeat us here, the Empire will send more fleets." Nick looked at the alien commander with something like pity. "There is no Empire anymore. Your homeworlds have fallen to rebellions. Your colonies have declared independence. This fleet is all you have left." The final battle ended with the surrender of the remaining Zentari ships. Supreme Commander Naltesh was dead, killed in the fighting on his own bridge. Of the 300 ships that had attacked Earth, less than 50 survived. Commander Veltar found himself in a strange position. He was the highest-ranking Zentari officer still alive. The humans brought him to Earth for the surrender ceremony. He stood in the Great Assembly Hall of the United Nations building, surrounded by representatives from hundreds of worlds. Many of them were species that had once served the Zentari Empire. Now they were free and they had humanity to thank for it. President Janet Miller stepped forward to accept the surrender. She was Earth's first leader to hold the title of Galactic Representative. Behind her stood Admiral Sullivan, a reminder of humanity's military power. "Commander Velthar," President Miller said, "do you surrender all Zentari forces and territories to the Galactic Liberation Alliance?" Velthar looked around the room at all the alien faces. A year ago, these species had been subjects of the Empire. Now they were equals in a new galactic government, and it was all because of the humans. "I surrender," he said quietly. Dr. Sam Hayes, now Earth's chief scientist for galactic affairs, presented the terms of surrender. The Zentari would withdraw to their home system. They would pay compensation for the unprovoked attack on the horizon. Most importantly, they would recognize humanity and its allies as equals in the galaxy. The ceremony was broadcast to every world in the galaxy. Billions of beings watched as the mighty Zentari Empire officially ended. In its place rose something new, a confederation of free worlds led by the species that had made it all possible. After the ceremony, Commander Velthar was taken to meet Dr. Kethvar. The old archaeologist was now considered a hero for his early warnings about humanity. He had been studying the ancient tablets for over 400 years. "You tried to warn us," Velthar said. "Why did no one listen?" Dr. Kethvar looked at the ancient stone tablets on his desk. "Because we thought we were the most dangerous species in the galaxy. We had conquered hundreds of worlds. We had defeated every enemy we faced. We could not imagine that something more dangerous existed." "What made the humans so different?" Velthar asked. "They do not fight for conquest," Kethvar replied. "They fight for survival, and a species fighting for survival will do anything to win." He pointed to one of the tablets. "The Velkari wrote this 10,000 years ago. They said the humans were the ones who never stopped fighting. They were right." Velthar studied the ancient warning. "What happens now? Do the humans plan to conquer the galaxy like we did?" "That is what makes them truly dangerous," Kethvar said. "They do not want to conquer anyone. They want to be left alone. But if you threaten them, they will destroy you completely." Admiral Brooks stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the last Zentari ships leave the solar system. The war was over. Humanity had won. But she knew this was not really an ending. It was a beginning. Earth was now the center of a new galactic civilization. Human technology would spread to hundreds of worlds. Human culture would influence billions of beings. Human military tactics would change how wars were fought throughout the galaxy. But most importantly, the galaxy had learned a lesson that would not be forgotten for thousands of years. On worlds across the galaxy, new warnings were being carved into stone tablets. But these warnings were not about humans. They were warnings written by humans for any species that might threaten Earth in the future. The message was simple and clear. We are humanity. We survived ice ages, plagues, and world wars on our home planet. We turned warfare into a science before we reached the stars. We do not seek conflict, but we excel at it. We prefer peace, but we are very good at war. The ancient warnings spoke truth about us. We are the species that never stops fighting when our survival is threatened. Remember this and we can be friends. Forget this and you will become a memory like those who came before you. President Miller stood in her office looking out at the night sky above Earth. Somewhere out there, on hundreds of worlds, billions of beings were living in freedom because humanity had refused to surrender. The ancient warnings had been right about humans. They were dangerous. They were unstoppable when threatened. They were the kind of species that could bring down galactic empires. But the warnings had missed something important. Humans were also the kind of species that would fight to free others from oppression. They were the kind of species that would sacrifice themselves to protect the innocent. They were the kind of species that would build something better from the ashes of what they had destroyed. The galaxy was entering a new age. An age where freedom was more important than order. An age where no empire could oppress its subjects forever. An age where the ancient warnings had been replaced by ancient promises, and at the center of it all was a small blue planet, where a species had learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is fight to survive. Because if you win, you might just change everything. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood in the center of the Grand Council chamber. Above her, thousands of alien representatives sat in circular rows that reached toward the domed ceiling. Their eyes watched her with expressions ranging from boredom to open contempt. She had given the same speech 3 times before. Each time they laughed. "Honored council members," Elena began, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "Humanity has served the Galactic Council faithfully for 47 years. We have worked your mines, protected your trade routes, and died defending your colonies. We ask again for equal representation and full citizenship rights for all human worlds." A sound like clicking laughter rippled through the chamber. High Chancellor Vexrath, a tall creature with silver skin and 4 arms, leaned forward on his elevated throne. His face held something that looked like a smile, but crueler. "Ambassador Vasquez," he said, his translator making his voice sound smooth and polite. "Your species has indeed been useful, like strong animals are useful. But you must understand your place. You come from a death world, a savage planet that breeds savage creatures. We cannot allow such beings to have power in civilized space." Elena felt her hands clench into fists. She forced them to relax. "We are not savages, Chancellor. We are people. You deserve what we choose to give you," Vexrath interrupted. "This council has spoken. Request denied. Again." More laughter echoed through the chamber. Elena looked up at the thousands of aliens, seeing the same dismissive expressions she had seen for years. They would never see humans as equals. They would never stop seeing Earth as a nightmare world that somehow produced intelligent life. She turned and walked out of the chamber, her jaw tight with frustration. 3 days later, everything changed. Admiral Marcus Chen sat in the command chair of the UHNS Valiant, watching the distress signal on his screen. His dark eyes were fixed on the blinking red dot that represented the colony ship Meridian Hope. 10,000 civilians, families, children, under attack by pirates in council-controlled space. "How long until we reach them?" Marcus asked. 2 hours at maximum burn, sir," his navigation officer replied. "And the council's nearest patrol?" 16 hours away, Admiral. They've acknowledged the distress call but ordered us to maintain position." Marcus felt ice in his veins. "Ordered us to stand down? There are 10,000 people dying out there." "Yes, sir. Direct order from Council Command. They say we're not authorized to operate in this sector." For a long moment, Marcus stared at the screen. He thought about his daughter, who would be about the same age as some of those children on the Meridian Hope. He thought about the oath he took to protect human lives. Then he thought about the consequences of disobeying a direct order from the Galactic Council. His hand moved toward the comm panel. Then it stopped. "Maintain position," he said quietly. The words tasted like poison. For 14 hours, Marcus and his crew watched the signals from the Meridian Hope grow weaker. They listened to the desperate messages, the screams, the final silence. When the Council patrol finally arrived, they found 8,642 bodies floating in space. The pirates were long gone. The Council issued a statement expressing their regrets and promising an investigation. They mentioned that human ships had been nearby but properly followed protocols by not entering restricted space. That night, Marcus sat alone in his quarters, staring at the list of names. So many children. He had been 2 hours away. 2 hours, and he had done nothing. His comm panel beeped. A message from Earth. High priority. Eyes only. Marcus opened it. There was no long explanation. No political speech. Just one word in white text on a black screen. Sovereign. He understood immediately. Earth had made its decision. They were done begging for respect. Done following rules that got their people killed. Done being treated as lesser beings. Marcus stood and walked to his window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Council sat in their safe worlds, convinced of their superiority. They thought humans were useful animals. Dangerous but controllable. They were about to learn they were wrong. Within hours, every human ship in the galaxy received the same message. Diplomats packed their belongings. Trade vessels changed course. Military ships began moving into formation. The recall was total and absolute. Elena watched from her apartment window as human shuttles rose from the Council's capital world. She had spent 15 years here, trying to build bridges between humanity and the galaxy, trying to earn respect through patience and diplomacy, all for nothing. Her assistant, a young man named David, entered the room. "Ambassador, our shuttle leaves in 30 minutes. Are you ready?" "I don't know if I'll ever be ready for what comes next," Elena said softly. "Do you think they'll really do it? Go to war?" Elena thought about the Meridian Hope, about the thousands of humans who had died over the years while the Council looked the other way. About every insult, every dismissal, every time they were called animals or savages. "Yes," she said, "I think we're past the point of no return." Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of his ship as the entire Terran defense fleet assembled near Jupiter. 31 warships, each one built in Earth's orbital shipyards. They looked different from Council vessels. Smaller, meaner, designed by people who understood war. "All ships reporting ready, Admiral," his first officer announced. Marcus nodded. He opened a channel to all human vessels and to every communication relay in the galaxy. What he said next would be heard across hundreds of star systems. "This is Admiral Marcus Chen of Earth's Sovereign Fleet. For 47 years, humanity has served the Galactic Council. We have followed their laws, respected their authority, and died for their interests. We asked only for basic dignity and equal rights. We were denied. 3 days ago, 10,000 human civilians were murdered while Council forces ordered us not to help them. This Council has shown us that we will never be more than slaves in their eyes. Therefore, humanity formally withdraws from the Galactic Council. We claim our right to exist as free and equal beings. We demand a formal apology, reparations for our dead, and recognition of our sovereignty. You have 72 hours to respond." He paused, looking at the faces of his crew, young and old. Different colors, different backgrounds, but all human, all ready to fight for their future. "And if they refuse?" someone asked. Marcus turned back to the view screen where distant stars glittered against the black. "Then they'll learn what it really means to anger a species from a death world." Message ends. The broadcast spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. On 1,000 worlds, aliens watched with shock or anger or fear. On Earth, billions of humans watched with something that felt like hope mixed with terror. They didn't know if they could win a war against the entire galaxy. But they knew they were done being victims. High Chancellor Vexrath received the message in his private chambers. He watched it twice, his 4 hands tapping against his desk in irritation. Then he smiled. Humans were finally showing their true nature. Violent, aggressive, exactly what he always said they were. He opened a channel to the Council's military command. "Assemble an enforcement fleet. 47 ships should be sufficient. These animals need to be reminded of their place. If they resist, destroy them. It's time the galaxy saw what happens to Deathworlders who forget their inferior." As the Council fleet began to mobilize, neither side knew that they were about to start a war that would change the galaxy forever. The Council's enforcement fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system exactly 72 hours after Admiral Chen's message. 47 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Pluto's orbit, their hulls gleaming with the proud insignias of a dozen different species. Commander Zelnoth, a veteran Zelthari officer, sat in his command chair with complete confidence. This would be over quickly. "Open a channel to the human ships," he ordered. On his view screen, Admiral Chen's face appeared. Zelnoth noticed the human looked tired. Good. They were already afraid. "Human Admiral," Zelnoth began, using the tone one might use with a misbehaving child. "The Council has rejected your demands. You will stand down your military forces, return to Council space, and submit to proper authority. If you comply within the next hour, we will show mercy. If you resist, we will crush you. Those are your only options. Marcus Chen stared back at him with those strange, forward-facing eyes. Predator eyes, Zelnoth thought with disgust. The human was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. Commander, did you know that Earth has spent 3.5 billion years trying to kill everything that lives on it? Volcanoes, earthquakes, hurricanes, ice ages, meteor strikes, animals that evolved specifically to hunt other animals, diseases that jump between species. Our world has thrown everything at us and we survived it all. We didn't survive by running away. We survived by fighting back, by refusing to give up, by becoming the most stubborn, dangerous species our planet could create. Zelnoth felt his neck plates rise in irritation. Is there a point to this history lesson? The point, Marcus said softly, is that you sent 47 ships to intimidate a species that evolved fighting for every single day of existence. You made a mistake, Commander, and now you're going to pay for it. The channel closed, Zelnoth laughed. All ships battle formation. Let's teach these animals a lesson they won't forget. The Council fleet moved forward in the standard attack pattern, a beautiful display of coordinated movement perfected over centuries. They had numbers, superior firepower, and generations of military tradition. This would be easy. Then the human ships moved, and everything Zelnoth thought he knew about space combat changed. The Terran vessels didn't form neat lines or follow any pattern the Council recognized. They scattered like a school of fish, each ship moving independently at speeds that should have turned their crews into paste from the G-forces. Zelnoth's tactical officer was shouting something about acceleration rates that exceeded safety limits by factors of 3 or 4. Impossible, Zelnoth muttered. Living beings can't survive those forces, but they could. Because they came from a world with higher gravity. Because their bodies were designed to withstand punishment that would kill most species. Because evolution had built them to endure. The first human ship, a destroyer called the Indomitable, dove straight through the Council formation. Zelnoth ordered his ships to fire. Energy beams lanced out, the standard particle weapons that had dominated galactic warfare for 1,000 years. They hit the Indomitable's shields and armor. The human ship kept coming. Shields are absorbing the damage, his tactical officer reported in confusion. Their armor composition is... I don't understand these readings. It's not standard materials. Because it's not meant for your weapons, Marcus Chen's voice came over the open channel. Our armor is designed to survive re-entry through Earth's atmosphere, to withstand meteor impacts, to take punishment that would vaporize your ships. You built your vessels for civilized warfare. We built ours to survive hell. The Indomitable fired back, not with energy beams but with solid metal slugs, accelerated to a fraction of light. Speed. Railguns. Kinetic weapons that the Council had, abandoned centuries ago as too primitive. The slugs tore through Council shields like they didn't exist. Physics didn't care about force fields. A chunk of metal moving at 50 kilometers per second carried more destructive force than any energy weapon. And it couldn't be deflected by the magnetic fields that protected against particle beams. 3 Council ships died in the first 30 seconds. Zelnoth watched in horror as his beautiful formation collapsed into chaos. Human ships were everywhere, moving in ways that shouldn't be possible, firing weapons that bypassed every defense system the Council possessed. They fought like they had gone insane, taking risks no sane commander would allow. But they weren't insane. They were just willing to push limits that other species couldn't survive. Captain Sarah Okonkwo piloted the Indomitable through a hail of weapons fire, her heart pounding but her hands steady. Her co-pilot, Lieutenant Hayes, was calling out targets and threats, his voice quick and efficient. This was what they had trained for. This was what humans did best. They adapted. They survived. They won. Captain, we've taken damage to the port side, Hayes reported. Hull breach in sections 7 through 9. Repair teams are responding. Keep us moving, Sarah ordered. If we stop, we die. She saw a Council dreadnought ahead, easily twice the size of her ship. Its weapons were swiveling toward her. A normal commander would have pulled away, seeking safety. Sarah pushed the throttle forward and aimed straight for it. Captain, Hayes asked nervously. Trust me, Sarah said. The Indomitable accelerated directly at the dreadnought. Council ships could move fast in straight lines, but they couldn't maneuver quickly. They were built for long-range battles where ships exchanged fire from safe distances. The dreadnought tried to bring its weapons to bear, but Sarah was too close, moving too fast. She waited until the last possible second, then fired everything she had directly into the dreadnought's command section. Railgun rounds, missiles, even their point defense lasers. The massive ship's shields flickered and failed under the concentrated assault. Its bridge exploded in a ball of fire. Then Sarah pulled the Indomitable into a turn that made her vision go dark at the edges from the G-forces. She heard Hayes grunt in pain beside her. But they survived the turn, and the dreadnought was crippled behind them. All across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human ships took damage, but they kept fighting. They rammed enemy vessels when they ran out of ammunition. They used the cover of debris fields and radiation zones that Council sensors couldn't penetrate. They fought dirty, fought smart, and fought without mercy. Commander Zelnoth tried to regroup his forces, but it was like herding frightened animals. His ships were designed for organized battles between civilized forces. Not this chaos, not this savagery. All ships retreat to Rally Point Delta, he ordered, his voice shaking. We need to reform, and a human missile struck his ship's engines. The blast threw Zelnoth from his chair. Alarms screamed throughout the bridge. They were dead in space. Through his cracked view screen, he watched the human fleet regroup with impossible speed. They had lost ships too. He could see the burning wrecks drifting through space. But they had won. Somehow, against superior numbers, they had won. 4 hours after the battle began, it was over. 44 Council ships were destroyed or crippled. 3 managed to escape back to Council space. The human fleet had lost 9 vessels and taken heavy damage to most of the others. But they held the battlefield. Admiral Chen's face appeared on every working view screen in the system. He looked exhausted, sad even, but determined. To the Galactic Council, he said, "You sent a fleet to crush us, to remind us of our place. Instead, you learned something important. You learned that Deathworlders don't surrender. We don't break. We don't know how. You can send more ships if you want. Send 100. Send 1,000. It won't change anything. We're not your slaves anymore. We're not your animals. We're free beings, and we'll fight for our freedom until our last breath." He paused, his eyes hard as steel. "You called us Deathworlders like it was an insult. Like we should be ashamed of where we come from. But we're not ashamed. We're proud. Earth made us strong. It made us survivors. And now you'll learn what that really means." The message spread across the galaxy within hours. Reactions varied wildly. Some species cheered, seeing hope that the Council could be challenged. Others trembled in fear, wondering what these violent humans might do next. And some, like High Chancellor Vexarath, felt only rage. He stood in his private chambers watching the footage of the battle for the 3rd time. His hands trembled with anger. How dare these primitives defeat a Council fleet? How dare they humiliate the greatest civilization in the galaxy? "Summon the War Council," he ordered his aide. "Mobilize the Purification Armada. Every ship. Every weapon. I don't care what it costs. These humans will be destroyed, and the galaxy will remember what happens to Deathworlders who forget their place." His aide hesitated. "High Chancellor, the Purification Armada has not been deployed in 300 years. Surely there are other options?" "Do it," Vexrath snarled, "and prepare the Worldbreaker platforms. If these animals want war, we'll give them war, and when we're done, Earth will be nothing but dust and memories." On Earth, billions watched the footage of the battle. They saw their ships fight impossible odds. They saw humans die defending their freedom. And they knew this was just the beginning. The Council would come back with more forces. They would come with fury and vengeance, but humans had faced extinction before. They had survived ice ages and plagues and every disaster their world could throw at them. They would survive this too. They had to, because the Purification Armada gathered at the edge of Council space like a dark storm. 300 warships from 12 different species, all united under one purpose: to crush humanity's rebellion. Warmaster Krelnak of the Krithian Empire commanded the fleet, a battle-hardened soldier who had fought in 17 campaigns. He looked at the assembled forces with satisfaction. This was not a police action or a warning. This was total war. "All ships report ready, Warmaster," his second-in-command announced. "Good," Krelnak rumbled. His species was large and heavily armored, evolved from herbivores who had learned to work together against predators. "We jumped to Sol system in 1 hour. Remember your orders. Disable their military forces. Occupy their homeworld. Show mercy to those who surrender, but no mercy to those who resist. The fleet jumped, tearing holes in reality to cross the distance to Earth in an instant. They emerged in the Sol system expecting a fierce battle, expecting the human fleet to defend their home desperately. Instead, they found almost nothing. Sensor sweep, Krelnak ordered. Multiple civilian stations detected near Earth's moon and around Jupiter. Energy signatures suggest several million humans in those locations. But military vessels, the sensor officer paused. Only 3 ships in orbit around Earth. The rest of their fleet is gone. Krelnak felt his battle plates shift uneasily. Where were the humans? They wouldn't abandon their homeworld. Would they? War Master, we're receiving a transmission from Earth. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the screen. He stood on the bridge of a ship that looked different from before. Newer. Bigger. Behind him, Krelnak could see a crew working with quiet efficiency. War Master Krelnak, Chen said. Welcome to Sol System. As you can see, we're not here to meet you. That's because we learned something important from your last attack. You can't win a war by defending. You win by making the enemy afraid to attack in the first place. What are you talking about, human? Krelnak demanded. Chen smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. It was the smile of someone who had made a terrible decision and committed to it fully. We're talking about the fact that while you were gathering your fleet, our ships were spreading out across Council space. Right now, human strike forces are in position near 15 of your most important worlds, not your military bases, your civilian infrastructure, your trade hubs, your government centers. Krelnak felt ice in his stomach. You wouldn't dare. You brought 300 warships to destroy our home, Chen replied. What exactly did you think we wouldn't dare? You wanted to teach us a lesson about our place in the galaxy. Instead, you're about to learn what happens when you corner a predator. When you threaten everything a human loves, we don't just fight back. We make sure you can never threaten us again. The transmission ended. Krelnak immediately opened channels to Council Command. Chaos greeted him. Reports were flooding in from across Council space. Human ships were attacking trade stations, destroying military supply depots, hitting communications relays. They weren't targeting civilians, but they were systematically dismantling the infrastructure that held the Council together. And then came the worst news. A human fleet had appeared near Zelthar Prime, the Council's capital world. The seat of galactic government, the most heavily defended planet in known space. War Master, we're receiving new orders, his communications officer said. We're to return immediately to defend the capital. Krelnak looked at Earth, hanging peacefully in space ahead of them. They had brought enough firepower to break the planet apart. But if they did, humanity would respond by destroying Council worlds in revenge. It would mean genocide on both sides. Total war. All ships prepare to jump back to Zelthar Prime, he ordered reluctantly. The Purification Armada vanished as quickly as it had arrived, racing to defend their own home. At Jupiter, Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the UHNS Retribution, watching the Council fleet retreat. Around him, his command crew let out sighs of relief. The gambit had worked. They had convinced the Council that Earth's fleet was scattered across the galaxy, forcing them to pull back to defend their own territory. In truth, most of the human fleet was right here, hidden in Jupiter's massive magnetic field and radiation belts. The radiation was intense enough to blind Council sensors, and human ships were designed to operate in environments that would kill most species. They had been waiting for days in conditions that turned Jupiter's orbit into a death trap for anyone else. All ships begin moving into position, Chen ordered. When they figure out we tricked them, they'll be back. And this time we need to hit them hard enough that they'll think twice about coming back a third time. Lieutenant James Rodriguez sat in the cockpit of his fighter, one of 300 small attack craft hidden among Jupiter's moons. He was 23 years old, fresh from the academy, and absolutely terrified. The waiting had been the worst part. Sitting in the radiation zone for days, wondering if his ship's shielding would hold, wondering if he would live through the coming battle. All fighters, this is Flight Command, a voice came over his comm. Enemy fleet has returned. They're bringing everything this time. Nearly 500 ships now that they picked up reinforcements. Form up on your squadron leaders and prepare for launch. James felt his hands shake. 500 ships. Against what? Maybe 70 human vessels and 300 fighters? The math was wrong. They were going to die, but they were going to fight anyway, because Earth was behind them. Because surrender meant slavery. Because that's what humans did. They fought impossible odds and somehow survived. Red Squadron, launch. The order came. James pushed his fighter forward, joining the stream of small craft emerging from Jupiter's shadow. Ahead, the Council fleet was deploying in a massive formation, ready to sweep through the system and destroy everything they found. The human fleet struck from 3 directions at once. Capital ships emerged from Jupiter's radiation belts. Fighters swarmed in from the outer moons, and missiles launched from hidden platforms scattered throughout the system. Weapons that had been pre-positioned and waiting in silence. The battle was chaos from the first second. James followed his squadron leader through a hail of defensive fire. Their target was a council carrier that was launching its own fighters. His head rattled with voices shouting warnings, calling out targets, screaming for help. He lost track of his wingman somewhere in the confusion. A council fighter appeared in front of him. James reacted on instinct, training taking over from fear. He fired. The enemy exploded. He didn't have time to think about it before 3 more appeared. Red 7, you've got 2 on your tail. Someone shouted that was his call sign. James threw his fighter into a turn that made his vision tunnel. The pursuing ships followed, but they couldn't match his maneuverability. Human fighters were smaller and faster, built for atmospheric combat on a world where air pressure could crush most species. In space, they were like angry insects, impossible to swat. He looped back and got behind one of his pursuers. Fired. The ship's shields collapsed under the assault of his mass driver. He was about to fire again when a massive explosion lit up the battlefield ahead. Captain Sarah Okonkwo's ship, the Indomitable, had taken catastrophic damage. James watched in horror as the destroyer, trailing atmosphere and debris, aimed itself at a council battlecruiser. She wasn't trying to escape. She was accelerating toward the enemy ship. "All ships, this is Okonkwo." Her voice came over the general channel. "It's been an honor. Take care of Earth for us." The Indomitable, a ship that carried 300 crew members, rammed the Council battlecruiser at full speed. The explosion was visible across half the system. Both ships vanished in a ball of nuclear fire. James felt tears on his face, but he didn't have time to mourn. More enemies were coming. He kept fighting. The battle raged for 6 hours. Human ships took terrible casualties, but they gave worse than they got. They used nuclear weapons, something the Council considered too dangerous and unpredictable. They deployed autonomous drones that hunted enemy ships without mercy. They used electromagnetic pulse weapons that overloaded the neural interfaces most alien species used to connect with their ships. And they fought in the radiation zone around Jupiter, a place where most species suffered from sensor blindness and system malfunctions. For humans, it was just another hostile environment to survive. When the Council fleet finally broke and retreated, they left behind more than 200 destroyed warships. The human fleet had lost 39 ships and countless fighters. The cost was terrible. The victory was real. Admiral Chen stood on his damaged bridge looking at the casualty reports. Nearly 20,000 dead. Captain Okonkwo and her entire crew, Lieutenant Rodriguez and 400 other fighter pilots. Thousands more wounded. And this was just one battle. "Sir, we're getting reports from our strike teams across Council space," his first officer said quietly. "Operation Ragnarok is proceeding as planned, but, Admiral, we've lost 5 more ships in those operations. And now we're getting intelligence that the Council is mobilizing world-breaker weapons. Planet killers. They're planning to destroy Earth even if it costs them everything." Marcus looked out at the stars, at the wreckage floating in space, at Jupiter's massive form hanging in the distance. The intelligence came through coded channels, delivered by a sympathetic alien who risked everything to warn humanity. The Council was building world-breaker platforms in orbit around 3 different star systems. Ancient weapons, banned by treaty, for 500 years now being assembled in secret. Each platform could crack a planet's crust, turning a living world into a dead rock. Earth had 96 hours before the platforms reached firing position. Admiral Marcus Chen gathered his command staff in the war room of the Retribution. Holographic displays showed the locations of the worldbreaker platforms, the Council's military deployments, and the scattered human forces across the galaxy. The math was brutal. They didn't have enough ships to destroy the platforms and defend Earth. "We need to end this war," Marcus said quietly. Not just win a battle. End it completely. If we let the Council regroup, they'll keep coming. They'll keep building weapons to destroy us. We need to take away their ability to make war. You're talking about attacking Zelthar Prime, his first officer said, the most defended planet in the galaxy. I'm talking about cutting off the head of the snake, Marcus replied. The Council leadership is on that planet, their central command, their political power. If we capture or destroy it, the Council collapses. Their member species will be too busy arguing about succession to coordinate attacks against us. Sir, we'd need every ship we have, another officer protested. That leaves Earth undefended. Marcus looked at the display showing his homeworld, blue and green and beautiful, billions of people depending on him to make the right choice. Earth has planetary defenses, shield generators, ground-based weapons. If the Council sends ships there while we're gone, our people will have to hold. But if we don't do this, those world-breaker platforms will fire in 4 days. Then none of it matters. The room was silent. Finally, his first officer nodded. Operation Ragnarok. All or nothing. All or nothing, Marcus agreed. 20 hours later, the human fleet jumped into the Zelthar system. 62 warships, thousands of fighters, and every marine they could spare. They emerged from faster than light. Travel already moving at combat speed, already firing. The defense fleet around Zelthar Prime numbered over 200 ships. But they weren't expecting an attack on their capital. They weren't expecting humans to be crazy enough to strike at the heart of Council power while their own planet was under threat. Marcus watched the tactical display as the battle unfolded. Human ships drove through the Council lines like spears, targeting specific vessels and ignoring the rest. They weren't trying to win a traditional battle, they were trying to create a corridor to the planet. Breaching ships, prepare for launch, he ordered. 8 specialized vessels built for exactly this mission broke away from the main fleet. They were armored like tanks and shaped like bullets, designed for one purpose: orbital insertion through hostile fire. Each carried 500 Marines in powered armor. The Zelthari defense forces tried to stop them. Energy weapons hammered the breaching ships. Missiles streaked toward them. But human engineers had studied every recording of Council weapons for 47 years. They knew how to build armor that could survive. 6 of the 8 breaching ships made it through. They hit the atmosphere at speeds that turned their hulls red hot. The G-forces inside would have killed most species. Human Marines, strapped into crash harnesses and wearing armor designed to handle Earth's punishing gravity, gritted their teeth and endured. Sergeant Maria Santos felt every second of the descent. The ship shook like it was being torn apart. Her armor's medical systems injected her with drugs to keep her conscious under the crushing deceleration. Around her, 49 other Marines prepared for combat. 60 seconds to impact. The pilot's voice crackled over the comm. Maria checked her weapon for the 3rd time, a rifle that fired explosive rounds heavy enough to punch through most materials. In Earth's gravity, the weapon would be almost impossible to carry. Here on Zelthar Prime with its 0.7 G, she felt almost superhuman. The breaching ship crashed through the roof of the Council's government complex and came to a violent stop inside the Grand Chamber itself. The rear hatch blew open with explosive charges. Maria was first out, her rifle up, scanning for threats. The Council members were still there, hundreds of them, frozen in shock. They had been in the middle of an emergency session when the ceiling exploded. Now they stared at the armored humans pouring into their sacred hall. "Nobody move!" Maria shouted through her armor's external speakers. "This building is now under the control of Earth's military forces. Resist, and you will be considered hostile combatants." For a moment, nothing happened. Then High Chancellor Fexrath stood from his throne, his forearms spread wide. "You dare?" he hissed. "You dare violate this chamber? You will be executed for this, all of you. Your entire species will be—" "Will be what?" Maria interrupted. "Destroyed? You already tried that. You sent 500 ships to destroy Earth and we beat you. You built world-breaker platforms and we're here anyway. You don't get to make threats anymore, Chancellor. You lost." More Marines poured into the chamber from other breaching ships that had landed throughout the government complex. The sound, of weapons fire echoed from other parts of the building as security forces tried to resist and were quickly overwhelmed. In orbit, Admiral Chen watched the tactical feed. The Council's defense fleet was in chaos. Some ships were trying to break through to protect their government. Others were pulling back, unwilling to fire on their own capital. The human fleet exploited the confusion, destroying orbital defense platforms and securing position over the city. Ground team reports the council chambers are secure, his communications officer announced. They have captured High Chancellor Vexrath and 43 other senior officials. Marcus allowed himself a small breath of relief. Phase 1 was complete. Now came the harder part. Broadcast on all channels, he ordered.